welcome to Perspectives, where we take a deep dive into the issues of the day and where we take a look at people's opinion on such issues. I am Ruth Osime. Welcome back to Perspectives, the Honorized News. The four basic needs of humans to survive are food, water, air, and shelter. Out of these four, what separates humans from animals is the fourth need, shelter. Living in a safe shelter can be likened to having a good doctor. If badly treated or mismanaged, the outcome can lead to fatal injury or even death. Building collapse, though a common phenomenon all over the world, is more rampant and devastating in the developing countries. The spate of building collapse in Nigeria in the past 20 years have assumed a very worrisome dimension as many lives have been lost and huge investments wasted. These incidents are not caused by an earthquake or a terrorist attack, but rather by poor construction and lack of oversight. Each collapse carries along with it tremendous effects that cannot be easily forgotten by any of its victims. In the most recent case, no fewer than 22 lives were lost and at least 130 people injured when a school located in Busa-Buji, Jos Plateau State, caved in while classes were on. The school's weak structure and unsafe location near a riverbank was cited as the reason for the collapse. It has been reported that several other buildings also collapsed in other parts of Nigeria on that same day. Recall in 2021 too, a 21-story building on Gerard Road, Ikoyi, Lagos State, collapsed due to negligence by agencies responsible for approval and supervision of the building project. The coroner said at the time that government agencies in charge of supervising the building were compromised. Several lives were lost in this incident, including that of the owner of the building itself. There have been too many cases like this all over Nigeria, and we are here today to discuss the situation with stakeholders on what needs to be addressed thoroughly to avoid such tragedies in future. We are heading for a short break. Well, stay with us because in just a moment we shall be getting acquainted with our wonderful people in the house. Architect and university lecturer BC Sulu-Olumide, construction and project manager Abimbola Ogunbiyi, and Indifreke Ukochio, senior executive in strategic business development. Perspectives will return in just a moment. Let us tell you a thing or two about our special guest, starting from BC Sulu-Olumide, an architect who has worked in both private practice and civil service. BC is now where she feels most fulfilled in the academia, the Department of Architecture at the University of Lagos. Her area of research is in housing for the urban poor. She's a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Architects and a member of the Architects Registration Council of Nigeria. We're also being joined by Abimbola Ogunbiyi, whose career as an architect, construction, and project manager spans over 35 years, with vast experience in the private, government, and foreign sectors. Abimbola has designed and supervised prestige projects too many to mention. She has been very active in the Nigerian Institute of Architects, both at the national and local levels. Abimbola serves in various capacities, as well as participates actively in conferences and seminars, both within Nigeria and abroad. And rounding off this stellar cast of guests is Indifreke Ukochio, who has 18 years experience in corporate communication, community relations, and stakeholders engagement. With the foremost construction giants, Julius Baer Nigeria, Indifreke has served as a public relations manager, liaison manager, admin, and project coordinator for the region South and East, and is presently a senior executive in strategic business development. A hearty welcome to all of you here on Perspectives.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You know, as you know, this issue of collapse buildings is a very, very pressing problem. And it's just coincidence I have all women. They're not a feminist, so I just happen to have all women as my guests today. So let's start with you, BC. Can you provide an overview of the recent trends in collapsing buildings in Nigeria so far?
Right, thank you. This year so far, if we start from January, February, we've had several.
Wow.
In Anambra State, for example, there have been 7. These include a market, another building which was under construction, a 5-story building, which had an architect and an engineer, both certified, involved. There have been also collapses in the recent one that we heard about that shocked everybody was a school in Jos Plateau State. So there have been several all over the country, and it is a very disturbing situation. All professionals are worried about it.
Okay. Bimbo, what are the primary causes of these collapsing buildings? Because I remembered even the one that happened in Benue. You actually did say that some other buildings also collapsed that same day. So what are the primary causes of this collapsing?
Thanks so much, Ruth. So the two major factors that lead to building collapse are human and then materials. Human errors are like negligence of the whole team, right from the client. The client can be responsible by not choosing the right professionals. The professionals could be negligent by not, doing their oversight functions. The government agencies and those who are supposed to moderate and prevent collapse by monitoring could be negligent as well. And then the materials factor are things like poor materials in use during the building process. We have lack of control of building materials. It's surprising that we have regulations for drugs, we have for banks, but the construction industry materials and profession lack those types of controls.
Yeah.
So there's nobody ensuring that there are standards, certifications that materials go through before they go into the building chain.
Okay.
And there are nobody ensuring that there are certifications for even the quacks and the artisans that work in the building construction sites.
Now that you mentioned that, let's get to you in Differeke. What do regulatory bodies, what role do they play in preventing incidents like this happening?
Thank you very much. Regulatory bodies, they establish building codes and ensure, they establish building codes and standards which ensures safety primarily and quality. So the codes, most of the codes covers various construction aspects, which has like the structural integrity, you have the electrical system, you have the fire safety, and you have the material use, just like she mentioned, and these authorities, these regulatory bodies also conduct regular monitoring inspections and they monitor the project site. We have also they issue approvals and permits for buildings before it is constructed. Like in Lagos State, we have agencies like the Ministry of Fiscal Planning. We also have Lagos LAPSCA, Lagos Building Control Agency. These agencies are the ones that do the regular inspections and monitoring to make sure that whatever was approved for you is what you're building.
But that's where the $1 million question now comes in, because a lot of these codes are compromised. And who are they compromised at? What legal actions are being taken? Bimbo, let me ask you, against those responsible for this collapse, because it's a collective effort for it to become the disaster that it now becomes. So what is not being done correctly in ensuring that these codes are met? How are they being compromised? How are the builders being compromised? What kind of things did they do to compromise the codes that have been put in place? The
codes that are being put in place are twofold. First of all, there's something that guides the professionals. And that's why we always say that ensure that you give your job to certified professionals, because all the institutes, the Architects Registration Council of Nigeria, the COREN, and other regulatory bodies for professionals ensure that the professionals who are registered have an oversight function. They have to do the right thing, or else they'll be reprimanded. Whenever there's a collapse, these institutes go into action, they carry out their own investigation, And if their members are found culpable, there is punitive actions against them.
When you say members, like for instance, now let's use the foreshore building, for instance.
Yes.
Rumor has it that it was supposed to be a certain amount of flats.
Yes.
And then it increased.
Number of floors.
Sorry. Number of floors.
Yes.
Then it kept on increasing and increasing.
Yes.
And nobody stopped it until this incident now happened. And in such a case, I think somebody from the state also, I don't know what department, was sacked. But is that enough?
That's not enough.
That's not enough. What things can be done? If, for instance, I buy a property and it collapses, what now happens to my money? Who do I go and see? What body is going to have my own interest for me to be able to recover what I lost?
First of all, during construction, the owner of the building is supposed to take out insurance,
Yes.
Okay.
Should insure.
which protects the building during construction. So the foreshore building that collapsed, I believe that the insurance should have taken care of all, but the insurance themselves, they will have done their findings to find out if they can.
The standards were really
if
kept.
the standards were
They really
kept, and they
kept
can
them.
be, and they.
But they went there several times.
The
And
insurance-
obviously
insurance companies.
No, I don't know about the insurance.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that the people in charge of supervising buildings,
The
when there's
agencies, the
agencies, went there
regulators.
several times,
Okay.
and apparently they were compromised.
Yeah, but you see, if I can interject, the issue is foundational. Now, we see a building, it looks nice, it's being advertised, people, off-takers, they may even buy off-plan, like I think happened in the Fourscore situation. And when Bimbo mentioned the issue of insurance, and the fact that the insurance companies will do their due diligence, they want to make sure that the people who are involved from the beginning have the capacity to take part in such a project. If the people involved are not licensed, are not regulated, it's not likely that an insurance company would want to take that responsibility.
Yeah.
And even professionals themselves also have indemnity insurance against what might happen in the course of their production or execution of the project. So from the very word go, if the standards, going back to what you said, are not maintained and kept all through the currency of the project, so not just at the beginning of the project, but right through the end, all the relevant professionals must be included, then obviously whoever's involved in the project will not get the compensation.
Okay, now that you said that, but how effective are the current enforcement mechanisms for building codes in Nigeria?
We all see what happens. And regarding building codes, we do have a building code, but it has not been enforced by all the states. I can actually show you.
Yes, you brought a book.
This is the Nigerian
I
building
also
code.
think it has not been adopted.
It hasn't been adopted. It
It
hasn't
hasn't
been adopted.
How old
It
is
has
this
not been
book?
adopted.
206?
This
I
is
can see.
2006, the first
So
edition.
why hasn't it been adopted?
If I'm correct, and I'm not a legal person, so I may not be so, but I understand that the Supreme Court also, I think, made a judgment also, stating that states can domesticate it on their own. So it's not something that has been adopted nationwide. And maybe we need to ask the states why each state has not thought it fit to take into cognizance all the different things that are specified here.
Because this is a
that
life
will
or death situation, literally.
guide
understand?
construction.
But let me ask you, Ndifreke, what technology advancements could help building safety in Nigeria?
Yeah, we have various technology advancements now that the professionals are using. We have the building information modeling, which allows architects, engineers, and the construction professionals to collaborate in building designs, even in its construction and its maintenance. So this model allows you able to see things when it's happening. While building it, you can actually identify faults easily. So we also have drones and unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. The drones sometimes was used on construction site for aerial survey, and it's also used for inspections. It helps you monitor the progress of it helps you monitor the progress of construction on site. And there are some places where inspectors, it also helps the regulators, where they add to reach corners. You use the drones to be able to access it it's actually very easy for them. So you also have the geographical information system. You have 3D printings, you have VRs, and I mean, there are lots of technology advancements that can be used in making this very easy.
Okay, can I add to that? Because buildings are getting more complex, the buildings are getting higher, people are, pushing the
envelope, basically.
Yes. So it's important that everybody in the construction industry collaborate. Because even if these new technologies are available and they're being used, individually by different people, so we're advancing in technology. Are the artisans also advancing?
That's a big question.
The people on site who are actually doing the construction, what is their level of progress in their own knowledge?
You spoke about a bricklayer. Who tell us?
Yes. I was telling you earlier before we came on set that when we were building our house, a house in Sulu-Olumide, there were this set of guys that were working as labor. And what does labor do in a building? They move materials from one point to another. Basic function. 2 months after we completed our building, this same team of laborers were seen in the next property down my road. Now they were bricklayers, and they were being called engineer on site. And I walked up to one of them and said, please, what has happened to you between when you left our site and what kind of training did you undergo? What kind of certification did you go through? Nothing.
That's so. But basically, what do you think are the socio-economic impacts of building collapses on the affected communities?
When the construction project takes off, it's not something that happens in a silo. There are people all over the community who are involved. We have people that sell food, for example, people deliver water, people that supply all kinds of materials. And so it's kind of like a community thing, even if the community is not largely involved, but people lose money, people lose lives. People's lives are changed forever. People are maimed. And then there's the psychological effects on people. The trauma of being involved in a building collapse, of seeing people who you know or who you knew at some point in time and seeing their lifeless bodies in a certain state. It cannot be described. So there are a lot of effects of building collapse on communities.
Personally, you could feel unsafe wherever you are. I mean, you're sleeping in an apartment or in a building and you're wondering, why is this going to collapse on me? I mean, it's blown off. I mean, there's so many things.
Even
there's so many
from
impacts.
that, you see some. Do they? I'm not an architect, but you know how sometimes when you're working in these high-rise buildings, there's a rope or something that's attached to you, so that when you fall, you don't really.
Okay.
The
harness.
harness.
Do they use it here?
Yes,
Well,
they do.
during construction,
Yeah, they do.
They do.
Oh, okay.
The builders are supposed to use them, but sometimes we get to site and you find a builder strapped to his harness, but he's not attaching it to the building because that's too much job. You see the person that has a nose mask to prevent himself from inhalation, he does not use it.
Those HSE preps, on construction site. And this happens when you have poor supervisors, on people who are not supposed to be on that project, and they're there. Because I mean, if you're a professional, you should know that before you start construction work, you need to prep your workers, you need to prep the artisans, And when you do that, you save lives, because it's all about them as well.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all about them, because if you lose them, you're going to stop the construction work.
But sometimes are these standards compromised because you want to get cheaper labor?
Yes,
I'm
definitely.
assuming so.
Every site
Sometimes.
should have a safety officer. The role of the safety officer is to ensure that safety. In fact, there's a safety statement of safety. There's a document that you're supposed to prepare before the building starts.
Yeah.
And you're
Which
supposed to
you also have to
educate.
give the regulators
Yes.
that
Give the
you are
regulators.
prepared. These are the
And-
safety measures you have in
And
place
you're having
for this
meetings with
construction period.
your workers, all your artisans, and you're telling them every week. You know, lapses in safety. You're saying how many people got injured during the previous week.
Lost
What
time,
are we
lost
doing?
time.
What are we doing about it? Do you know that in the building that you collapsed in May?
Just
Recently. Collapsed recently. Do you know that somebody lost 3 children?
Yes.
In that school.
Yes.
All the children of the family.
That's just so sad.
Very sad.
That's just sad.
Very sad.
But what do you believe is the most critical step in reducing the incidence of building collapses? Let's start with GBC.
Sincerity. Sincerity of intention and awareness. Public enlightenment. People need to be told the consequences of building collapses and the little things to look out for. Because we heard about in the, was it the Anambra State, the Jos school collapse, that the students had been complaining.
Oh, they had?
They had
Even
complained and the parents had complained about feeling unsafe and hearing, feeling vibrations in the building.
Wow.
But the complaints were ignored. And obviously they weren't reported. Who would they go to? And so if people are not made aware of these things, the incidences of collapse will continue. Education is key, and government also has to step up and let people know that there are certain agencies you can speak to, there are certain agencies that have responsibility in monitoring, even buildings that are under construction, talk less of those that have already been constructed, and put the appropriate people in place. Regarding the Jos school collapse, we were told that, I think it's Jos, we're told that there is a monitoring team for schools, but they look at
A monitoring team for schools?
yes, monitoring team for
What
school
role do they
buildings.
play?
So they look at what the building looks like, and they look at facilities, playgrounds, toilets, and that sort of thing. But on that monitoring team, there are no building professionals.
Oh,
So that's a critical
That was a
aspect
big
that
oversight.
needs to be addressed.
okay. But are there any upcoming initiatives or projects at reducing building collapses?
You know, you mentioned that what do we think can be done to prevent these building collapses. Do you know that the education of the public to know that they need to hire professionals? Because the buck stops and ends with the team. So the client, the moment you're thinking of building construction, you should be thinking of employing, and it's not because I'm an architect, but you should be thinking of employing an architect. So the architect guides the client, who is the owner of the building, through in the process of procuring
Yeah, but you said
the
architects
building.
also have challenges with owners who now see
Yes,
themselves
but
as developers.
what
So what
hap-
usually causes those challenges?
The architect, you know, if the architect is well-grounded and knows their stuff, that's why the client hired the architect in the first place. The client has to trust the architect that, look, this person I'm hiring knows better than me, that's why I'm hiring. So all the advice that the architect gives you, you can even bounce it with 1 or 2 other people. But it's important that, for example, before the building starts, every investigation that needs to be done is done. In Jos, we learned that the soil-bearing capacity was very low. There was a gully that was like 2 meters away from the building, a gully. And this building was built as a bungalow. And the client just came and said, add 2 more floors.
Wow.
Yes, it was built as a bungalow. It was changed to 2 more floors on top of a bungalow.
Okay, now that you mentioned the soil, so there are different types of soils, some buildings that cannot be on certain types of soil?
Yes.
Why? Because they're close to the water, or why what are the What are the reasons why they cannot be built?
It has to do with the soil, the bearing capacity of the soil, the type of soil. So that's why before you commence construction work, you do the soil test. Okay. So the soil test with the report, the geotechnical interpretation would advise you what you need to do. Okay. Before you commence.
So certain buildings cannot work with certain soil capacity.
No.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense. But I've heard of huge hotels that apparently the foundation wasn't very good. Yes. You know, and some of these hotels are still standing today. So is there any possibility that any of them might collapse?
What I'd like to say to that is that let's look at our bridges. Our bridges are built on water. On water. But it means that the foundation of those bridges was deep enough to hit firm ground and be anchored on firm ground. So it's not that a building cannot be, you know, but the requirements, the technical requirements for the foundation have to be put in place. There are no shortcuts when it comes to the foundation of a building. And the problem is that a good foundation and a proper foundation will cost money. And because it is under the ground and people don't see it. A lot of clients will cut corners on the quality of the foundation that is designed by a proper engineer. Okay. You know. Now, one of the cases, I think it was Anambra, there was actually a registered architect on the project, on the DMGS project, which is a 5-story building. There was a registered architect on the project. There was a registered engineer on the project. But there was a soil test, apparently, or some form of test that was done, and the recommendations apparently were not followed through. So therein lies the responsibility of the client, of the team, and everybody to follow the recommendations so that, come what may, you will be advised appropriately. And again, the professionals will tell the client from the get-go, this is possible and this is not possible with what you intend to do. Not all projects are feasible.
Yeah, but now that you mentioned that, I remembered, sorry to keep going back to this Foursquare issue. Foursquare issue. Because apparently there was an agreement that there would be only a certain amount of floors. Yes. So in such cases, who pays the price when the building now collapses?
I hear that the consultant structural engineers on that project actually resigned from that project because they saw that the way they had designed this building and the load it was supposed to carry had been exceeded.
Okay, so who pays the price for that then? Who now?
It's a criminal case.
It is, but who is now held responsible? As in,
it should be the state. It should be the client.
I think every other person, some other professionals. Some other professionals.
No, I mean before that, before the incident.
But my point is, the owner of the building has died.
Okay.
So who is held responsible? Is it the supervisors from the states that were supposed to watch the progress of the building? Who is held responsible?
Everybody is responsible.
And usually in such cases, what should happen?
There has been.
There should be. I mean, there should be
some form of prosecution.
Yeah, exactly. There should
be an investigation and a prosecution and public knowledge, so that people know.
I don't think it's just enough for one person to be sacked from whatever department. No. There should be some form of prosecution. There should be sanctions and fines. Anyway, we're going on break right now, so we'll come back to discuss this. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Grab your tea, as I always say, and see you right back on Perspective. Now, I was saying to you, Bimbo, or any of you, that there was a woman, for instance, who lost 3 children in this building collapse in Jos. Now, what is going to happen to that woman? How is she going to be compensated? Even this other building that we were discussing earlier on, the 21-story, there are people who actually bought the buildings, paid hundreds of millions of naira to, for this investment. So what happens to the investors? What happens to fatalities? How are they compensated? What body is in charge of ensuring that investors get their monies back, if possible? It's not just enough to say, oh, we're going to sack one person from whatever company or whatever body was in charge of supervising this project. What more can be done to protect the interests of the investors and also compensate for loss of lives?
I hear that an investigation has been set up. This team comprise professionals, even school reps and stuff like that. every time there's a collapse, there's an investigation. These professionals really, really investigate and come up with recommendations to the government. But because the law belongs to the government, they're not able to, do further than that. The buck still lies with the government, that the government is the one that has to ensure that all these recommendations are carried out. They have a whole list of those who are culpable, and that's presented to the government. But when it comes to financial things, losses, financial losses, it will have to be insurance, like I said. Human losses like losing a child, losing children and stuff like that, that has to be compensated. You can never be compensated for losing a loved one. But at least there has to be some kind penalty for those people who caused this.
But are there legal bodies? Are there legal bodies specifically designed for situations like this? You know how you have Koren and Akon. What role do they play in addressing issues like this?
They do. Koren has sent their representatives to all these sites. And by the way, there have been so many collapses of recent, even within Lagos State. Koren goes, we have a Koren rep, an Akon rep, Architects Registration Council of Nigeria, in every state of the country. And each of these reps have visited these sites. They have made recommendations. If our people are culpable, what they do is that they sanction our people. But they can't go beyond our people. They can only make recommendations that this body should be penalized.
Let me add to what you're saying. You see, when those recommendations are made,
yes.
As soon as the collapse happens, yes. the government takes over. Okay, they take over the scene. So, and these recommendations will be presented to them. So, I think government should be able to make this recommendation public.
Yes.
But sometimes they just don't do that. I mean, if we don't know what the recommendations are, how do we follow through in prevention? Because we don't know who was at fault, what happened. The only thing they just give us a general statement that it was caused by substandard materials. They just say general things. But we have never seen anybody sanctioned before.
That's my key question.
We have never seen anybody sanctioned. Nobody has gone to jail before.
Especially on the side of government staff.
Yeah.
It's important the government staff are seen to do what they're meant to
and
do
not
and take responsibility. And where they are found wanting, especially in all the reports that are produced by the professional bodies, it should be stated and people should know, so that when a project is under construction, one can identify the person in charge of it from the side of the government and ensure that they do the right thing. It cannot continue this way. People need to know.
Also, it's important that there's regulation for the entire construction industry. For example, developers. Who regulates that body? We know that builders have their own body, but developers, who regulates them? Who ensures that they have the right professionals in their employment? Who ensures that they carry out the best practices that they're supposed to? The regulation of the building industry, like I said earlier, is very important. Other industries are regulated.
I mean, in the medical
yes, we have NAFDAC.
Yeah, exactly.
That's regulating the drugs. Who is regulating the construction industry?
But why don't we have that?
Unfortunately, Nigerians, when things happen, everybody's talking about it. The moment, like that 4-score building, the moment it collapsed, we've had nothing about it. And everybody has gone to bed.
Because building shelter is almost as important as health.
It is.
If you're living your life in the hands of a quack doctor, it can lead to the same thing as living your hands in the life
I think
of
quacks
a quack
have
builder.
taken over. Quacks. The more expensive building materials are, the more they're compromised. The more we have substandard building materials being brought into the country. We have ISO standards. We have other standards that are supposed to be followed. Who follows them? Who makes sure that a Y16 reinforcement, for example, is been calibrated as 16. Who ensures that? They sell it to us as 16. Meanwhile, it is 12. It's 14. It's used in the building.
This is so sad.
You know, it's so sad.
So though we do have a standards organization of Nigeria, which is meant to enforce standards of all imported and locally produced materials, it appears that the whole range of materials and products that are used in the building industry are just too large just for one agency to attend to. So maybe SON should be unbundled and have different sectors that would attend to different products.
Okay.
The structural materials, the drainage materials, mechanical, all kinds of electrical materials, for example. Each section might have each material might have a section in charge of it. You know.
Another thing I want to add is that the people who are supposed to be monitoring building construction, for example, in Lagos State, we were told that at 1 month, 50,000 construction projects were going on in Lagos State. How many people are working for Lagos State? How many people can, monitor these projects as they should every day? So we have been advocating, and Lagos State has already started doing this. We have been advocating that they need to bring in the private sector to work with them. The private sector has a lot of brains, a lot of resources to work with them to augment the resources that the government has.
Okay. Does the concentration of population in cities also add to specific problems of providing adequate building structure?
Like we just said just now, the rise in population means the need for more buildings.
Yes.
More, there's so many high-rises going up in Lagos now. And that's happening across the whole country. In Abuja, the same thing. In Jos, the same thing. So the more the population grows, the more you find out that there is need for construction to be going on to meet the needs. Yes, the more materials, we need to train more people. We need to ensure that people are certified. We need to have a structure in place. To ensure that everything follows a process. Now, things are not following processes anymore.
So any artisan any artisan without qualifications can just come on and say...
they're engineers. In fact, they call it...
In addition to that, the population boom has made it such that people are in a hurry to build. So the time frame, the planning, all the processes are being rushed. So you might go to a street today, in 3 months' time, you go back and there's a massive building.
But can you complete a building in 3 months? Is that practical? That's not very practical, is it?
In many cases, it might not be.
But the client says, I want this building in 3 weeks.
Yeah, but who can build in 3 months?
So developers will.
If you as a...
in 3 months?
Some developers will.
If you as a professional...
You see a difference. Some people will see a difference. They might complete it, they'll build. It might not be completed. But a lot of processes would have taken place, And because people are hungry for property, people want to acquire property. And so the shortcuts that may be taken would make sure that...
and it's those shortcuts that cause all these disasters.
Yes.
And there's also the due diligence of the client that needs to be done. Clients need to be educated. That, look, the cost of a collapse is so high. The cost, and it's collapse that we see. Many buildings have failed. The failure of the building, even during the floods that happened in Lagos recently, 3/4 of the buildings on the island were underwater. That's a failure. It may not have collapsed, but that's loss of property, loss of livelihood. So let's not only address collapse, let's address that building failures needs to be, prevented as well. So the client himself needs to do their due diligence. Stop engaging quacks. Stop cutting corners. Stop sidetracking procedures that are laid down. These procedures are laid down for your good. And every building needs qualified professionals.
Now that you're talking about timelines and what have you, let me ask you in different way. What about when agreements are breached concerning of-plan completion and handover? What about when changes are made to designs, timelines, qualities, and costs, like we've just been discussing? What does the client now do?
Well, in breach of contractual agreement, sometimes you seek legal recourse. First and foremost, you probably would want to use the alternative mediation to an arbitration, to be able to see what you can do, how you can adjust, or if there are practices that you do not like, how do we strengthen the relationship so that the construction work can go on. But in a situation where you can't meet that, I mean, you can also call for termination. The contract can be terminated.
Yeah, but even if you contract, how do you get your money back? Because I've known instances where people have put money down off plan and the architect or whatever tells you, oh, it will be ready in 2 years.
Is that the architect?
The developer tells you it will be ready in 2 years. Yes. Do you understand? Obviously, the value of the money when you put it down and the value of the money in 2 years' time, because he hasn't met the agreement, or as appreciated, because he hasn't met the agreement, they now tend to either make the place smaller or compromise on the quality of goods that they use. So, who protects the investor in that kind of situation? Which is what I was.
The investor should have their own lawyer.
Yeah.
So before you go into this type of agreement, you need to engage your own lawyer to go through the fine prints and have your back as well. But let me say that in the last couple of years in Nigeria, the unprecedented devaluation of the naira, the rise in cost of building materials, the rise in cost of labor and everything has really made it's almost a force majeure,
Yeah, it's almost impossible to meet
what is
standards.
happening, it's almost impossible to deliver on what you have promised.
Yes.
So the person who owns this property, who has bought off plan and has to also know that, look, the chances of you getting what you want
done
that's very
at the price,
the
initial price is almost impossible.
Exactly.
It's almost impossible.
So they have to look into going into variations, talking to. I mean, that's why I said you have to use mediation.
There has to be dialogue.
Yeah, they have to be
Okay,
dialogue.
but what about there are certain places, certain areas that you cannot build more than a certain height. What about as neighbors? How effective would your role be when you see somebody building 4 or 5 story building against what the Lagos state or whatever state agrees? How do you cross-check to ensure that this kind of things do not happen? How do you stop the builder from breaking the law?
You call in the regulators.
That's it.
You call in the regulators.
But I've seen instances where people have actually built more than the...
Well, it also depends on who owns the building. Because if the person has clout, and you report, nothing will happen.
So we're back to square one.
You can report and still continue reporting. Every community, like every local government, has a fiscal planning authority office. You walk to that office. It happened to me. My neighbor was building almost to my, almost touching my fence.
Are you serious?
And I knew that couldn't have been approved. I went to the fiscal planning authority and I went to report that on this plot, go and check what was approved. He's not building it. And immediately it was stopped.
That's because you're an architect.
Yeah, maybe because I'm an architect, but the public to have say.
So when he was stopped, what happened?
He had to pull it back.
Oh, okay.
He pulled it back to the setback that was approved for him to have constructed.
A lot of it is awareness and
awareness.
the ability to be persistent with your complaints or your grouse. Yeah, some people will just be turned back or turned off by and they just won't proceed. Exactly, that's another issue as well.
Yes.
But this is a bit worrisome because you find that usually when you get neighbors who complain, they see them as busybody or as they tend to ignore you because I think also for people who break the law, there should be sanctions.
Yes.
I recall a few years ago, I can't remember what dispensation it was, somebody that's a builder like this was sentenced. I don't know whether any of you recall, was actually sentenced because lives were lost.
Yes.
So I think if there are sanctions, if there are sentences made, because it's not just enough to say, oh...
Leave the work. or stop construction.
Exactly.
No, it's not enough.
It's not enough.
Or you say pay fines. No.
And I think that even when sentences are made, it should be made public.
Yes.
Because I believe sanctions are actually carried out. But it should be made public. People should be made public examples when they carry out these things. And when there are collapses, people should be held responsible and they should be made public. So that this would deter other people from carrying out the same practices.
But as a body of architects,
yes,
have you collectively under one voice approached the government to tell them other ways that you can better handle these building collapses? Because it seems that there's a disconnect between your body and the government officials.
No, I don't think there's a disconnect.
Because you just said now that the National Building Code has not been adhered to.
Yeah, well...
So if the National Building Code that was designed to educate people and also educate artisans and stakeholders has not been adopted, what can now be done? Because this voice has to be heard. When it comes to shelter, when it comes to health, these are areas that you can't compromise. So what do you think collectively as a body of architects you can do to make your voices louder, especially with the alarming rates of these collapsing buildings that we're seeing?
I can assure you that our institute, under the leadership of our female president, we're representing her, by the way. She was supposed to be here today. Architect Mbolaji Adeni, as well as the Architects Registration Council, they have been a pressure group to the government on these things. We have met, we have had seminars, we have had symposia, we have had delegations to the ministers and so on. So it's not as if we're not doing our bit.
So so what has been the progress from that?
Well, I believe it's work in progress. I believe they're still good. I mean, it can't go on like this. I'm sure
people are losing lives.
Yes.
And you might be interested to know that before one of the collapses happened, I think, was it the Just collapse or Anambra?
Yes.
The state chapter of the Institute of Architects actually held a press conference to speak about issues concerning building collapse. And not just a week after, there was this collapse. So it's not that people are aware and they're trying to do their bit. We can only start by advocacy and enlightening people and letting people understand the consequences and therefore trying to draw government in to take part and take its full responsibility, because at the end of the day, it's government. Government can and government cannot. So we need to make sure the government does.
Okay, so any parting shots, what key words would you like to say towards the end of this conversation that you feel will be impactful to our viewers and the government?
I would like to say that the building codes and standards, the framework should be enforced. They should be updated and enforced, so that we would have reduced. I mean, when those things are when they are reviewed and they are enforced, I mean, it will help to prevent building collapse. And also, I mean, they should improve on using technology advancement in construction practices. Let's try to use more, improve more. I mean, using technology advancement, it will help.
I would like to say that it's important to engage the right professionals, because every professional is under an umbrella and they can be sanctioned, they can be regulated. But when you go for quacks, there's nothing that can be done with those quacks. So the public need to know that there are professionals, certified professionals. Ask for their certificate before you engage them. And that way, at least you have done your due diligence, and they can guide you through the best practices, the best way to.
But do you think there are enough platforms, enough institutions
for training
built to train artisans and make them better qualified?
Back in the day, there used to be trade schools. There used to be trade certifications. There was, I think it was the guild, some guild or the other.
Yes. So that needs to be rebuilt.
It needs to be rebuilt. Not everybody is going to go to university.
Okay. So we're party church. We need to really rebuild institutions that can train artisans to make them professional enough, and that will translate to better building practices.
Yes,
thank you so much. Ndifrike, for being with us. Thank you so much, Bimbo.
It's
Thank you
our
so much,
pleasure.
Bisi.
Thank you so
I
much.
hope you enjoyed it, and I hope our
Thank
listeners
you.
would have learned a thing or two from this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, building collapse in Nigeria is significant and has consequences that cut across the entire spectrum of growth and development. It deserves all stakeholders' attention to seek means of minimizing these largely avoidable incidences. You can't build a great building on a weak foundation. You must have a solid foundation if you are hoping to have a strong superstructure. It's not just the beauty of a building you should look at. It's the construction of the foundation that will stand the test of time. And I keep saying, life is a learning curve. So that's all we have for today. All we have time for today. You've been watching Perspectives here on Arise News with me, Ruth Osime. I hope it's been a pleasurable and informative experience for you, just like me. Until next week when we return, do stay safe and have a wonderful time. See you next week.